no way, there's no way God would send children to hell. But there are a few that I would consider. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Espresso with Sky, where you'll get fresh perspectives on faith, life, God, and the Bible. My name is Pastor Sky, two sidekicks, Chewy and John Wick. If you haven't done so, go ahead, hit all those buttons like sub, like, whatever it is, but the most important one, leave a comment below. Want to hear your honest opinion about today's topic, and we can have an honest conversation. Also, if you want to support our ministry, we got PayPal and buymeacoffee.com. All right, so let's get into today's topic about children going to hell. Now, sometimes we have questions that are really difficult, like the one we have today. We kind of wish there was a direct answer. Like Jesus actually said, like in James chapter 2, Jesus says, no, they don't go to hell. Or yes, some children go to hell. Like if we had that answer, it'd be so much easier, but we don't. So what do? We discuss and we infer answers from scriptures and knowledge and understanding of what we know. But in the end, only God really knows the answer to this. Now, today's topic is really emotional because we're talking about children. Could this loving, merciful, and just God send children to hell? Like when we think about children, they're innocent, they're pure, they're just a bundle of joy. And even we think about murderers, there's a difference between someone who kills adults and someone who kills children. Why? There's such a high value put upon children, even more than adults. And this is why today's topic is very, very difficult and controversial too. So let's get into today's topic, and we're going to go over a few points to make us think more deeply about the question we're asking today. The first question we need to ask is, how do you get to heaven? And this is important because we need to start with the baseline on how to get into this discussion topic. So, how to get to heaven? Well, Jesus says simply himself in John chapter 14, verse 6, there's no other way except through him. There's only one way. Now, think about that, guys. If there's only one way, then that's the only thing that matters. So, if this is the rule, then why do we need to discuss this topic at all? All we need to ask is, did your child believe or not? Did they believe in Jesus or not? And then that would simply be yes or no, would tell you whether they're going to heaven or hell. However, this brings me into the first point for today. Don't oversimplify. There are some topics, some discussions, some themes that are not as easy. They're not just cut and dry, black and white. If you did this, you're good. If you do that, you're bad. It's not that simple. What we need to understand is there's always special circumstances we have to take into consideration. So let me give you an example of even how God takes special situations into consideration. One time, Jesus was speaking with the religious leaders, and he basically tells them, God hates divorce. The religious leaders turn to Jesus and say, wait a second, but then if he hates divorce, why would he give us a divorce certificate through Moses? And then Jesus answers in Matthew chapter 19, verse 8, and he says, it's because your hearts are hardened. It was never meant to be like this from the beginning. Which means things happen, special circumstances happen. Yes, does God hate divorce? Absolutely, but he also understands that there are special circumstances that need to be taken into consideration, and that is why we can't just oversimplify, okay? So the second and last point I want to make today is the most important one. So listen carefully and think really deeply about this. God truly understands every individual's situation and circumstance because it makes a difference. It does. The way we were raised, the country we were born in, the religious upbringing, socially, culturally, mentally, financially, all these things make a difference in every person's life, and it shapes the way that we think. If we go even more extreme, what about the people with trauma? Whether it's their parents died early, or the parents divorced, or people who are physically, mentally, sexually abused, all these things make a difference. And when we meet people with heavy trauma, we're really sympathetic to them. Now think about this. If even we are sympathetic to these people from these types of situations and circumstances, how much more would God be? How do I know this? In the Bible, there's this amazing story, and it's Jesus with his disciples, and they're watching people give offering, okay? Now, as they're giving offering, these wealthy men coming in, they give their bags of gold and silver, and they're just giving lots of money. And then finally, there's this poor widow, and she walks in with her last 2 copper coins, and she puts it in the basket. And in Mark chapter 12, verse 43 and 44, Jesus turns to his disciples and said, that woman gave more than everyone else. But if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Why? Because if they gave bags of gold and she only gives 2 copper pennies, they obviously gave more, right? If I give $10 for offering and you give 5, I've given more. So how can Jesus say she gave more? Because what is God doing? God cares about every person's situation and circumstance. If it's just about money, God would say that whoever gives the most money goes to heaven. Whoever gives the most money is the more righteous. And the answer is no. That's why God, when he asks for a tithe, he doesn't say everyone give $10 million in your lifetime. Not even 1% of the world will even make 10 million in their lifetime. But instead, what does God do? Understanding that every person's situation, circumstance is different, he says 10%. Which means if you want to be equal, then the person who has $1 million gives 100,000, and they will be equal to the person who makes $100 and only gives $10. And God says, in my eyes, they're equal. Why? They're giving exactly according to their situation and circumstance. God truly cares about every single person's situation and circumstance. It makes a difference. So now that we understand this point, what does this have to do with, do children go to heaven or hell? Right? What does it have to do with it? Well, if every person has a different situation and circumstance, and if we look at children in general, do children really comprehend what it means to be saved? Do they comprehend who God is? Do they comprehend what it means to die on the cross? Do they? And the answer is no. Even a child who's 4 years old and someone says, do you believe in Jesus? No, I don't want to. Do they really understand what they're saying? And God's going to be like, oh my goodness, you rejected Christ. You're going to hell. Which brings the flip side is, even if a child accepts Christ, do they really understand what they're saying? That's what we have to figure out. That's something that we can't even figure that out. Only God knows that. Even for myself, I was a Christian all my life. It took me 10, 11 years before I finally accepted Christ. And guess what? What did I do for the other 10 years? I went to church because my parents took me. I went to church because my friends were there. I went to church because they had amazing Korean food after service. I loved it. And of course, last but not least, the one that I'm kind of shameful of is there was a corner store with an arcade game called Street Fighter. And I really loved the game, and it made me excited every week to go to church because of that. Yeah. Was it the right reason? And the answer is no, it took me 10 years. Every person's situation, circumstance is different. What about people born in another religion where they teach their children not to be Christian? They teach their children to hate other religions, or they teach their children that this is the only way. You have to follow this religion and only this one, and they're just going to follow their parents. We have to think about there are so many different situations and circumstances. Now, what does that mean then in the end? Well, does that mean God just sends them to heaven? If that's the case, if God just sends all children to heaven, regardless of situation, circumstance, whatever it is, then it might be easier just to kill all the children because they'll never get a chance to reject. They'll never get a chance to get into their own family's religion. Like, oh, okay, let's just hope that they all die. And we should be happy. Oh, they died. They're going straight to heaven. Thank God. But like, no, that doesn't make sense. On the flip side, if children who don't believe go to hell, then we would say, well, that doesn't seem fair. God, don't you see their situation and circumstance? It's much different. Which means what? We're stuck with this conundrum of what? Well, if they don't go to heaven, well, wait a second, then where do they go? Well, this will be in one of the future videos is there another place besides heaven and hell? Are there levels? And that's an interesting question with interesting scriptures, and we'll look at that another time. All right, guys? So everyone, thank you so much for joining us on today's discussion, looking deeply into some points that make you think, you know what? I never thought about this, and it makes you want to study more about the Bible and God. All right? So everyone, have a wonderful week. Have an awesome time. We'll see you again next week. My name is Pastor Sky. This is Chewy. John Wick, and we'll see you guys again next week. Bye-bye. Toodaloo, Scooby-Doo, whatever it is. All those things combined to one. Have a wonderful week. All right, bye-bye.